Previously on Pax Americana. Alien attack on New Eden colony completely wiped out thanks to the brave charge of Corvette Captain Lorene Gosh. Navy has begun a next-generation naval development program with plans for new classes of warships across the spectrum, from corvettes to large 60,000-ton fleet carriers. The first colonists have arrived on Terra Nova. Initial reports are indicating strange and fantastical megafauna found on the icy world. Next up on Pax Americana. Civilian shipping lanes stock has boomed earlier this year thanks to the recent discovery of new systems with significant mineral deposits found close to Earth. The UTS Pegasus and her crew have finished trials as the fifth and last carrier of the Adamant class enters service. The first F-8A fighters have been deployed to the frontier. Colonists object to the significant military garrisons on the frontier, saying these recent attacks are fabricated. Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the next episode, episode 5 of Aurora 4X Pax Americana. We're here and we're back as we begin today's episode. So, I do want to say before we get into everything, I hope you guys have been enjoying the content, and so far the reception has been really good, so we're going to continue to keep it flowing forward. And so let's talk about where we are as the United Terran Nations. Well, currently we are in the period of expanding, solidifying our colonies, and exploring out further. We now have 4 colonies in 3 different systems that are not Sol, and we are also terraforming Mars at the same time. So we're making really good strides in both colonization and expansion. We've explored around 20 systems, and in this aim, we're going to continue to expand that amount. Now keep in mind, we're going to hit a war where we will encounter non-player races, aliens, and that's going to be a threat to us. So what are our goals? Well, our first goal is going to be to continue our expansion, continue our colonization, and continue to access new deposits of resources and minerals to bring them back to Earth, so that we can continue with the efforts to build up our industrial capacity, build up our military capacity to defend our new colonies against potential alien threats, which we have, in the last episode, seen very well. In terms of military, in terms of our military situation, we need to be thinking about what is going to help ensure our defense going forward. And so we've already begun construction of the fighter defense bases, of the maintenance bases, as well as programs for new carriers, new frigates, new cruisers, all of these things that will be very vital for our needs. As you can see on screen here, we are sending the first maintenance facilities to Terra Nova Prime, and that will allow them to support the frigates that are currently in orbit that are running off their own supply. And those frigates are defending our assets there because, again, we have come under attack by 2 alien warships so far, and lest we forget the 60 alien warships next to Sol. A short-term goal of our navy is to defend our colonies, defend our capability, same with our army. The medium-term goal is to build up capability, and the long-term goal is to use that capability to destroy those 64 alien ships that have been detected in Bernard Star, as well as take the fight to the aliens. Because the facts is that we are the unabated masters of the galaxy, and any aliens who decide otherwise must be met with deadly force. So, as you can see here, we are sending out our exploration ships, and we're also training up the Galactica's strike group to be 100% trained, and that training will allow them to be a lot more effective when the time does come. All along the Red Sea there to go and continue its exploration. So we've got, as we can see here, we actually see Epsilon Eridani, and Epsilon Eridani has a system or a planet with enough oxygen that it could support alien life, and so I'm a little bit more cautious about sending in the Pacific Ocean, which discovered the system, and so I get ready to launch the jump points. However, I make a mistake and I realize this vessel does not have deployable long-range buoys, which is a bit of an issue. However, we figure out that we're actually fine, and we also find Groombridge 334, so that's another system discovered, and quite a big system with 2 stars, one orbiting very far out. So to facilitate that capability build-up I was talking about, we're going to need things like better power technology, so better engines, better power reactors, better fuel efficiencies. We're going to need better missiles and kinetic weapons, and potentially even armor. All of these things will allow us to really up our capability, as so far the alien ships we have seen have been comparable in capability and size, except for one major fact, and that is the forces within Bernard Star sitting at 30,000 tons, 20,000 tons, and having very, very many of those kinds of warships, which means that we have 2 times less tonnage, military tonnage, than that force. So if we were to send in our 5 carriers, it's doubtful that they would be able to do a decent amount of damage and break through any kind of point defense systems that they may have access to. So yeah, the Pacific Ocean comes in here, and it's going to go and survey Epsilon Eridani 3, which has the relatively similar, relatively more habitable atmosphere in the world, with a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, and not breathable, but pretty decent. Though I doubt Epsilon Eridani 3 will ever be really terraformed properly because of the significant eccentricity of the orbit. Meaning that there's going to be quite a high temperature fluctuation, comparable to other planets. That's why Proxima Centauri Terra Nova is so valuable, is because of its very non-eccentric orbit, meaning that it's very stable, it's very consistent, and we know what we're dealing with, and we can begin to terraform that world very easily. Galactica is about to finish up its training, and then it'll go into an overhaul period, and it'll be ready for 1989. Around there is when the Galactica will be ready to go. And we're also discovering further minerals further afield here, and as you can see here, we are finishing up our maximum level of training on those vessels. And exploitation of the minerals that we find is going to again be the most important thing, because there are 3 minerals that we cannot do without: corundium, gallacite, and duranium. These things, and also iridium in some parts, these things really help. And as part of those efforts, we need to get people to other places, and that's why we have the Falkland and the Kyushu, who are going to be set up into a new colonization group, and we're going to have them load up colonists and send them to Terra Nova Prime, and that will again grow the colony as big as possible, ideally, because we need to get it up to be able to support necessary infrastructure to support military operations as well as civilian operations. And we're also going to be building more of fuel harvesters, more on pretty much everything, and our technology is going ahead pretty well here. We finish up the Estonia, Japan, and Latvia. That'll be part of the next Adamant class carriers strike group. So they are DD-16, DD-17, and DD-18. We're probably going to end up with maybe 18 to 22, 23 destroyers, depending on needs arising within the next 10 years. By that point, we should be able to start building out the newer DDX class destroyers, which do need naming, of course. And I'm again having a look here at how our effects on Mars are accomplishing. Now, Mars actually has a pretty eccentric orbit as well, and that does mean there is some about 20-degree variation between its lowest point in the orbit and its highest point in the orbit. We finish up the UTS Pegasus, which is the newest of the carriers. So that now gives us a total of 5 light carriers available for service, with a total operational fighter wings of 64 fighters among them. Then what we're going to do is we're going to build 2 Aachen class carriers. So that'll bring us up to a total of 7 carriers. And then after that fact, we're going to start probably bringing that number down as we start to phase towards fleet carriers, where we'll have the Aachen class kind of take over the duty for the Adamant, and the larger carriers taking over the primary operational duty. I envision the usage of light carriers as supplementary to fleet carriers, in that they can be deployed to frontier outposts. They're much smaller, easier to maintain with local infrastructure, and their carrier group is just overall better for that purpose. They can also be used for escort duty or for dealing with specific threats, while fleet carriers would only ever be deployed into theatre operation, depending on, of course, what kind of, a large threat like, for example, the threat in Bernard Star. Here come the Colonization group. We are unloading more and more people onto Terra Nova Prime, and again, we have defense there with the frigate squadron there defending it. Something that we are probably also going to need to do is continue to expand those frigates, as that's something that we haven't designed a new generation for, because they are going to probably be able to work for so long. We probably won't retire the frigates we do have until the 2010s, so another 30 years or 20 years at this point. And we also just finished up our surface orbit weapons, and so I'm getting here to design what formation it's going to look like. And I go through some falafel, but the general idea that I go for is that we're going to have a 50,000 ton hierarchy, and the Planetary Defense Command is going to have the HQ in it and the supplies in it, and then we're going to have 2 regiments or batteries of planetary protection systems, as well as planetary interception systems. So the planetary protection system, that is the 12cm ultraviolet laser, and the planetary interception system is the Gauss cannon turret. Then with the remaining tonnage, we're going to have in place for that, we're going to have infantry with emplacements, with heavy machine gun nests, towed artillery, all this other stuff, that capability, and that will provide local defense for the surface to orbit weapon systems, and will provide us with kind of a baseline. So we'll have this 50,000 ton force that we can then drop on a world, and that will provide immediate defensive capability to that planet, and then we can drop additional planetary defense commands when we need it, which are PDCs essentially. The Canada, Oman, and Rhodesia finish up overhaul, as well as the Galactica of CVL-06. The Red Sea and Oda again needing additional operations, and we begin to move research labs from when we were researching 240 RP to now power and propulsion and missile and kinetics technology groups. I'm also going to finish off the ground force construction rate 400. And overall, I'm pretty happy with our current situation in terms of exploration vessels. We will need to replace these eventually, and my plan is to replace them with a 15,000 ton vessel that will be able to go much further, will have much more efficient engines, and will have a jump drive on it, as well as more geological and gravitational survey capability than previous generations. And again, having a look at Mars here, as you can see, the temperature does go up, down, up, down, up, down. We're getting to about 0.1 atmospheres of Atesium. We need to probably get that to about 0.3, 0.4 before the planet starts really warming up to a good enough point. And we also need to get terraforming modules, so we can actually send those terraforming modules to Terra Nova to begin colonization. Because the fun thing about Terra Nova is that it would basically be like living in the Arctic, but a bit different, right? You're basically living on an ice world, not necessarily to that extent, but you're living on an ice world, and the atmosphere is perfectly breathable. You can breathe in the atmosphere. You wouldn't need an oxygen mask. However, the cold requires you to wear a cold suit at pretty much all times, or be in infrastructure, and that is why there is colding costs there, because the temperatures are basically Arctic temperatures, and that is really, really hard for you to deal with. But you wouldn't need a pressure suit, which is really beneficial when you think about it, and that's why you put so much more infrastructure there. And again, the Pegasus is beginning its own training as we finish up the Galactica's training. And I do like using the Battlestar Galactica names, actually, for the carriers. Yes, in the show, they kind of are assigned to the colonies, but in this, they kind of just sound like great names that you would have, like American American-style names that you might have. And again, we discover Shu-238, and so what starts to happen over here in Illumin, which we were kind of neglecting, is we start to find multiple areas with actual pretty big systems with decent habitability and quite a few worlds. And so I start to think, okay, well, we've got 2 different avenues here. We have 61 Cygni, we have Lalanid and Proxima Centauri to our northeast and to our north on the Galactica map. And to our south and southwest, we have Lumen, and that Lumen arm has a lot of resources that we also want to expand out into, and so we're going to eventually build up plans to expand there. But what we really need, and what we'll be working on, is additional colonization capability, because as you can see, it's been about 10 years and we only have about 10 million people not living in Seoul. And we really need to pump that up to 100 million, 200 million, 300 million if we're really going to start exploiting the resources there. And the primary limiting factors to these two things are infrastructure, costs, and then transportation. Those are the primary moving factors. And then we also have defense, being cautious, and that's why we are actually, we just see there, we had the first Ambriel class fighter defense base built, and that fighter defense base will be, again, a prefabricated thing where we'll load all the fighters into Earth, we'll load the fuel, we'll load the ammo, we'll then transport that to a colony further afield, and then that colony is going to be able to have all of those fighters, all of that capability built in. It's going to have about 20 fighters available to it. That gives it about 80 missiles of retaliation. But the most important thing it has is that those fighters can keep rearming, keep rearming, keep rearming. So we would be able to knock down multiple enemy ships that may be coming our way. And again, the Pegasus running out of fuel as it usually does, but the training is going ahead pretty damn well over there. And we're going to be setting up, I think, for the Ambriel here, something. Oh yeah, we're going to be moving additional maintenance facilities to Proxima and Centauri because we need additional maintenance facilities to ensure that we can actually maintain the frigates in orbit. Proxima Centauri is about 10 billion kilometers away from the Earth jump point, so it's quite a distance. I need to look into if I can shorten that maybe with Lagrange points or something else. But that distance is our primary negative factor on top of the infrastructure cost, of course. The move infrastructure. We discover on Truth 98 some really big minerals there. We've been discovering a lot of really great amount of minerals, and we've only so far seen two different alien threats. We've seen the precursor threat in Bernard Star, and then we've also seen the raiders attacking us, but very limited attacks. If we can push out the precursors, we can then expand in the Bernard Star direction, and that could really open up a lot of opportunity to us. So I think my goal is going to be, by the year 2000, around the year 2000, have a force being built that will be able to take the fight to them. And this means that we're going to need to build up supply vessels, support vessels. We're going to need to build up a significant ordnance stockpile, and we're going to need to have those big fleet carriers. If we have those big fleet carriers, we should have enough ordnance to wipe out most of the enemy's shipping. We also have the Arnhem, Trafalgar and Kochi, I think, there of the frigates finishing up their overhaul, and they're going straight back into service. And Terra Nova Prime receives its proper maintenance facilities, which is always nice to see. I think, I'm also upgrading our Arbalest shipyard up, because we're going to plan to build the CTX, which is a 2200-ton corvette, which will have 8 size 12 missiles, tubes, that will allow it to defend against those threats that we earlier saw with our corvettes having to deal with them. But the biggest problem that we had was actually doing enough damage with the salvos, having to use every last salvo we had. And again, we are setting up further colonists missions to be moved. I have designed a 100,000-ton colony ship, but again, we're waiting on the shipyard to be completed before we can do anything with that just yet. And this is also going to take quite a bit of time to build, because colony ships with the cryogenic transports are very cost dense. They're very, very expensive ships. They're not something that can be easily replaced or easily built. They're very specialist in that regard. And here we go. I'm setting up the fighter wings for the fighter defense base, which we will then be deploying to New Eden for colony defense missions. Those colony defense missions are going to be very, very important, because that provides significant additional defense to New Eden. And then we're going to eventually fill up another one and deploy that to Proxima Centauri, deploy another one to Horatio, and maybe even deploy one to a Nelson military base. And the purpose of which, of course, is planetary defense, and it also means that we have these FAA fighters in nearby and capable of responding to immediate threats wherever they arise. As you can see here, there we go, we're sorting out the FTB Ambriel, which is the name for the ship, or not ship, for the station. Need to make sure it's using the correct missiles, though, the SIM-4Bs. And in turn, I'm going to build 3,000 additional of them, because Those are going to be replacing the SAM-4As, which are widespread in use across the fleet. And then eventually we're going to have the SAM-4C, which will probably be using ion drive technology, which will make it much faster, much more capable, as well as other kinds of missile technology. There we go, Ambior's ready to go. So we order the tug, the other tug that we have in the fuel harvester. We actually need more tugs. That's something that we need to start building. I order the tug found in our fuel production. That's usually for fuel harvester movement. And I order that to move over the Ambriel to 61 Cygni and to New Eden. And so how this works is we have these commercial hangars, and obviously those commercial hangars can't stop the maintenance clock on the fighters, but because they're in orbit for a planet that has the maintenance capacity, those 11,000 tons of fighters still get maintained even if they're in the hangars, which makes it really, really beneficial because we can still use those hangars for reloading, rearming, refueling, and obviously moving them to the colony very, very nicely. And that's why we're building so many FAA fighters, because we're going to need 20 fighters per base, plus 3 E1s. It's going to be quite expensive in that regard. And so we finally finished up moving the Ambriel over. We're going to rename it to the Planetary Defense, or Fighter Defense Base 1. No, New Eden Planetary Defense Group 1, and that is going to have our FDB F8As ready to go, ready to fight as needed. That's 20 of them ready to operate. And it also means that we can always refuel and rearm stuff in orbit as well whenever needed. But those FAAs are going to do a lot of really good work if we do get attacked again. We're nearly in 1989 as we come up here. And we are finishing up the overhauls for many of our frigates, and we're getting them moving over. And then we've also got the Pegasus, which is going to begin its overhaul as well. Mercury hit 10 million people, so we're going to put that to stable population for now. And we'll also hit 5 million people at New Eden. We're going to try and get that built up to 10 million ideally, and then we're going to start transporting over mines. Again, we need to start terraforming both New Eden and Terra Nova Prime as our primary objectives after Mars. And then we're going to use Mars as kind of offloading additional capacity and growth. It's kind of a proof of concept for the terraforming installations. The issue with the installations is how many people they require. In that we don't have many people in our colonies, in our further colonies, and that means we can't really send them over to properly terraform. The Pegasus's fighter wing and fighter groups are starting to get fully trained up, about 100% training there, which is awesome. And the great thing about having so many fighters is that they all have commanders. So usually, if you don't have a lot of ships, a lot of people stay idle. They don't really do their job, or not really do their job, but they don't really have a place to go. And with a lot of fighters, you know, I have 100 plus fighters now. That means that those fighters all have lieutenant commanders under them, and that means that they can, actually have something to do. We're also reaching primary flight control. I'm going to be researching our single power plant production, but I'm going to go for maximum engine power. Both of those are going to be really useful because they will help in multiple ways for our fighters. The power boost will help with the missiles. They will also help with the engine capability, making the engine smaller, and the power boost will help with reducing potential size of fighters. As I have been considering the idea of adding a beam weapon to our primary multi-role fighter. Because that beam weapon could potentially, if done correctly, could provide point defense capability in addition to providing offensive capability. So there's some real potential benefits there. And so we have the Pegasus, again, refueling, sorting itself out. Freight Fleet 1 with the maintenance facilities to just complete their orders. And overall, we're doing pretty well in terms of like wealth and richness. We just need to get more mines moved over. We have 120 mines now on 61 Cygni A1. Which is fantastic news, and those mines are really, really going to help move the resource over to New Eden. I want to get mines on New Eden, and I want to start moving like 10, maybe 50 construction factories over to New Eden, and then use the corundium we get from there to start moving it over. I may also consider looking at orbital mining modules, but that research may be quite costly and not really sure how I feel about that, because there's a lot of asteroids actually in Proxima Centauri and in 61 Cygni. They can have significant resource deposits and significant resources that we can then ship over to Earth, not Earth, to New Eden. Because if I can start a local manufacturing sector there, that will then allow us to start building mines and stuff in system, and then we can start moving those mines to asteroids and to other places in system a lot cheaper overall. It's going to need a jump point. And again, we are expanding pretty further afield with those 8 ships. I think the Red Sea, remember, each of these ships has been in service for probably about 11 years at this point, which is not a small time. Terra Nova Prime is actually growing really quickly at 2.5 million people. That's because the infrastructure cost is so low that the colony ships are coming in hot and fast from our civilians. And as you can see here, the colony ships are arriving, unloading those people, and they're starting their lives on Terra Nova Prime. For now, very, very cold lives. Terra Nova at minus 72 degrees centigrade. That is not somewhere you would want to generally live. However, I would take that and a breathable atmosphere over no breathable atmosphere and no foliage or anything. So once we warm that planet up to like minus 10, minus 0 degrees, 10 degrees, that's going to be a really nice and lovely planet to live on. It's going to take a while for that dream to come true, but it is going to be the goal of the United Terran Nations. And that I think it will truly be a new home. The other thing that Proxima Centauri also has is we have a gas giant in system, not much sodium on it, but enough sodium that we can then put a couple fuel harvesters on it and have them begin slowly depositing fuel on Terra Nova in a local fashion. And they're so close to each other that the transport should not be an issue whatsoever. I'm also building up STO 1 and 2s. Now, what these are essentially just a couple or 5 at most of the STO elements put into a formation, and then we're going to combine them into our real formation later on. That's unfortunately just how costing works currently until 2.2, when it becomes more like industry. Again, we discover a system of 1 and 9 Aquarii, and we actually find very, very valuable planets here. Now, nothing as good as Terra Nova. However, I was extremely concerned the potential for aliens. But 1 and 9 Aquarii is a very big system. It's relatively close to the Sol, and it has 2 planets that are potentially very habitable. If we look here at 1 and 9 Aquarii, I think it's a 3. It's a subtropical world, and so there's a lot of pretty big benefits from that in terms of kickstarting a terraforming project on the world as well. So as you can see, we're arriving at 1 and 9 Aquarii. We set up the waypoints to hit most of the inner worlds with our sensor probes. And we begin launching them over. Sensor probe 1, and then again, these move very, very slowly. They move 500 kilometers a second, but they do their job of informing us of potential enemy threats. They have an active sensor already on the actual probe themselves, and so we're going to send them over to their targets. One-day increments, and again, as I said, very, very slow, but they're splitting up here to their assigned objectives. And again, Mars's temperature fluctuating significantly. It goes from a max to a minimum of minus 48 to minus 22, minus 0, minus 10, minus 5. That kind of area will be colonized. But it's currently minus 45, even with the 0.1 atmospheres of Etesium on the world. We're going to increase that to 0.3 atmospheres of Etesium. And watch as our probes go in here as they split towards their targets. So far, no detections of anything significant, so I'm pretty happy. That means that 1 and 9 Aquarii is a completely free system to seize. And Aquarii 3 can potentially be a pretty good body to colonize because it is in a relatively non-eccentric orbit. It's got nitrogen oxygen atmosphere, it's got 30% liquid, it's at a temperature that's not too ridiculous. So there's some significant benefits there. We find the trinary star system with a single planet, nothing habitable, and then we just move on with our day there. The Loch Ness, though, will go and, of course, geologically survey. our STOs start to begin finishing up training on Earth, which is pretty nice. And we start setting up the planetary defense commands as I previously wanted to set them up. So yeah, if you have a look, well, I'm bringing it up. The system of 109 Aquarii, the planet is subtropical. Aquarii 2 was the actual one, with a temperature of 29.5 degrees, which is completely habitable for human settlement, with a gravity of 1.35 and a pressure of 1.83. If the oxygen levels were increased to 0.1 atmospheres, 0.1 atmospheres, a decent percentage of the actual oxygen level, we would have a completely breathable planet there, and that would be a fully colonizable planet we could send people over to. So that is definitely going to be another priority target right there. But I think that's when we're going to leave the episode off. Hope you guys have enjoyed. Please like, comment, subscribe. It really does help me out. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. You guys have a great one.